We begin CBS2 News at 5 with breaking news. An LAPD cruiser has crashed into a building in Boyle Heights.
Let's go to Stu Mandel live in Sky 2 with the very latest. Stu?
Well, Jeff and Pat, it's happening out here at the corner of Cesar Chavez and Cornwell. Now, earlier this afternoon, that vehicle that you see there with two LAPD officers inside was responding to a backup call and we're not sure if they were going code 3, but they were in a rush, there's no doubt. Apparently, there was a minor accident with a civilian vehicle before the vehicle crashed into this hair salon. Both the officers inside that vehicle were not taken to the hospital and were refusing medical treatment. We also know that the civilians in that other car also were not taken to the hospital. Right now, though, LAPD is out here. They're doing an extensive investigation on how this accident took place. Live in Sky 2 over the Boyle Heights area. I'm Stu Mandel. Back to you two in the studio.
All right, thank you, Stu. Well, more breaking news to tell you about. A pedestrian pinned between two cars in Gardena. This happened just moments ago in the area of West 134th Street.
Now, Pat, it does appear the man suffered a serious leg injury when one car rammed into the back of another. It is, however, still not clear what led up to that accident or how that man got caught in the middle of those cars.
Kids used in retail robberies. That's what local prosecutors say this couple did. Prosecutors say the crime spree spanned at least 7 cities.
And today, those children's parents came face to face with the judge.
And CBS 2's Nicole Comstock is live in Riverside with what happened inside. Nicole.
Well, the criminal complaint alleges that couple used both a young girl and a young boy to steal thousands of dollars worth of merchandise. A Moreno Valley couple accused of coercing kids into committing a string of retail robberies appeared in court for the first time Tuesday.
It's crazy how many agencies are involved, how many locations.
The Riverside County Sheriff's Department says in some cases, Daryl Campbell directed those kids to grab merchandise, while Jamie Preston waited outside as the getaway driver. They say they carried out the crimes at 9 Inland Empire stores, 2 different Home Depots, and a Target in Moreno Valley in April and May, and several other major retailers last year in Menifee, Eastvale, Riverside, Lake Elsinore, Glendora, and San Bernardino.
They were basically talking to them and telling them what to say and coaching them.
The criminal complaint alleges Campbell and Preston used threats, commands, and persuasion against an 11-year-old girl and a 16-year-old boy.
We entrust adults to protect these children, whether they're their parents, grandparents, any guardians, and they're basically putting these kids at risk of danger and injury.
The couple's family came to court but had no comment. Campbell mouthed to his family, "I'm going to call you," as he was escorted out. Now, the couple is scheduled to appear in court again on the 26th. The Riverside County Sheriff's Department says there could have been other crimes, and if there were, they certainly want to hear from you. Live in Riverside, Nicole Comstock, CBS 2 News.
Nicole, thank you. Well, less than a year after the Las Vegas massacre, MGM Resorts is now suing survivors, including more than 800 from California. A gunman, you might remember, shot and killed 58 concertgoers and injured 850 others last October from his suite at the Mandalay Bay. MGM filed lawsuits on Friday against more than 1,000 survivors. It's all, they say, in an effort to avoid liability. It argues a post 9/11 lawsuit limits its liability, and lawsuits against it should be dismissed. An attorney representing some of the victims told the Las Vegas Journal-Review the filing is outrageous. MGM issued this statement today. The federal court is an appropriate venue for these cases and provides those affected with the opportunity for a timely resolution. Years of drawn-out litigation and hearings are not in the best interest of victims, the community, and those still healing.
Las Vegas Metro Police have released dramatic video of an officer opening fire in the middle of a car chase. One suspect was killed and another was wounded in the shootout. Yes, it looks like something out of a video game. The officer driving a SWAT car through residential streets, and he's chasing murder suspects. He pulled out his gun and began shooting through his windshield at the SUV in front of him. Well, eventually one of the suspects was hit and crashes into an elementary school wall.
In my opinion, they showed a level of bravery, professionalism, heroics that we come to expect from our officers.
The suspects were identified as Fidel Miranda and Rene Nunez. Miranda was killed in the shootout. Nunez faces multiple charges, including murder.
We may have had a ball in Helsinki, but President Trump today returned to harsh criticism over his meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin, and that led to a rare reversal today.
Well, President Trump admitted today that he misspoke during his news conference with Vladimir Putin.
But he says the mistake only had to do with one word.
CBS2 political reporter Dave Ryan is here now with more on what the president would and contraction wouldn't say.
He said wouldn't and he meant would, or he said would and he meant wouldn't. Was it a misstatement? Was it an apology? It was kind of hard to tell sometimes exactly what was going on. After a 24-hour political hurricane of criticism over his Helsinki remarks absolving Russia of any blame for their 2016 election meddling, President Trump tried to calm the waters today. He read a written statement and made some off-the-cuff remarks, which boiled down to he made a misstatement yesterday. But he didn't stop there, and the storm continues. A strange coincidence today as President Trump tried to shed light on what he meant to say in Helsinki.
I have a full faith in our intelligence agencies. Whoops, they just turned off the light. That must be the intelligence agencies.
Sources tell CBS News that White House officials urged the president to clean up his remarks Monday when he appeared to side with Russian President Vladimir Putin over his own intelligence agencies about Russian election meddling.
He just said it's not Russia. I will say this. I don't see any reason why it would be.
He now says he misspoke.
The sentence should have been, I don't see any reason why it wouldn't be Russia. Sort of a double negative.
But the president never addressed the other moments critics have questioned, such as when he highlighted the strength of Putin's denials instead of his own intelligence officials' conclusions.
President Putin was extremely strong and powerful in his denial today.
Or when he blamed both sides when asked if he holds Russia accountable for anything at all.
Yes, I do. I hold both countries responsible.
And even while reading his statement today supporting the intelligence community's conclusion that Russia is to blame, well, he ad-libbed this.
Could be other people also. There's a lot of people out there.
So how will lawmakers respond now? Well, Republican Senator Bob Corker said he senses the dam of support for President Trump is breaking with Republicans on Capitol Hill.
I had calls until late last night from people on both sides of the aisle about next steps.
Florida Senator Marco Rubio is proposing new sanctions against Russia, something Democrats say they support. But Democrats are also calling for hearings to find out what President Trump may have said during his 2-hour one-on-one meeting with Vladimir Putin.
We're worried about what the president said publicly. We're even more worried about what happened in those 2 hours when the president was alone with Mr. Putin.
And they may get a chance to find out more about that. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is now scheduled to testify before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee next week about exactly what happened in Helsinki. So we know what we'll be talking about next week. This is not over for sure.
We knew that as of yesterday, didn't we?
Absolutely.
All right.
Yeah, no doubt.
Thank you, Dave. Okay. Well, today, former President Barack Obama spoke at an event celebrating the 100th anniversary of Nelson Mandela's birth. He didn't mention President Trump or Vladimir Putin by name, but he did condemn leaders who deny facts.
Look around. Strongman politics are ascendant, suddenly. Too much of politics today seems to reject the very concept of objective truth. People just make stuff up. We see the utter loss of shame among political leaders where they're caught in a lie and they just double down and they lie some more.
The former president also called on all people to reject the politics of fear and resentment. Political coverage continues right here at 6:30 on the CBS Evening News with Jeff Glor.
Right now, Pasadena police are pushing back after a mother and daughter sued the department, accusing officers of inappropriate conduct. CBS 2's Suzanne Marquez is in the newsroom at this hour with video of the traffic stop that sparked this lawsuit. Suzanne?
Jeff, the two women allege they were sexually assaulted by the officers. The Pasadena Police Department first responded by calling the lawsuit baseless. And today they backed up that claim by releasing the dashcam video.
What they did to Ryan was wrong. Okay, but why are we about to argue with the law? It's not about arguing with the law. You should know your rights.
You'll see for yourself that whatever their allegations are, it didn't occur.
Lieutenant Jason Clausen showed us this video of a 2016 traffic stop, now at the heart of a lawsuit. The mother and daughter in the car are suing Pasadena's police department.
Do you have anything on your purse, on your person in the car that has your name on it that I need to know?
They claim they were stopped without reasonable suspicion, physically searched and molested. The lawsuit claims an officer ordered the mother to lift her shirt, forcing her to expose her breasts, and that she watched as another officer fondled her daughter. Lieutenant Clausen explained how authorities interpreted the video. They determined the charges were unfounded.
One officer asked the passenger to lift up her shirt just to expose her waistband to make sure there's no exposed weapons or anything, any anomalies present. The other officer, driver officer, asked the driver to get out of the car, and he conducted a quick cursory search of her waistband only.
He says the traffic stop occurred as part of a larger investigation.
These two women were possibly in contact with somebody that they were watching, and they believe there was evidence in this vehicle. So there was a team that followed the vehicle. They observed vehicle code violation, and the officer stopped them.
Because she's driving the car, ma'am. So I understand that, but she's driving the car, and part of the vehicle code is you have to have a driver's license.
This afternoon, the Pasadena Police Department released the entire video of the traffic stop online. As posted, it does not show any escalated exchanges between the officers and the women. We're still waiting to hear from the women's attorney with reaction to this newly released video. You can see the video in its entirety by going to our website at cbsla.com. Back to you.
All right, thanks, Suzanne. Pizza with a purpose, as Southland restaurant chain is honoring a fallen hero. California Pizza Kitchen is hosting a fundraiser to benefit the family of David Rosa. The Long Beach fire captain was shot last month. He was responding to an explosion at a senior housing facility. Rosa was a 17-year veteran of the department and a married father of 2 sons. Now, if you eat at CPK today, 20% of your bill will be donated to his family. Just mention the fundraiser to your server. The restaurant is partnering with the nonprofit organization, The Fallen Heroes.
A lava bomb hits a tour boat off Hawaii's Big Island, injuring nearly 24 people. Unbelievable video and how it's changed tour rules.
Plus, hikers are on edge after reports of more shots fired near Malibu Creek State Park.
And check this out, a local bear beats the heat by taking a dip as a whole neighborhood then goes on lockdown. We're live tonight with the very latest.
Hey everybody, I'm Garth Kemp. Get ready. Here we go again. More humidity, a chance of thunderstorms. Your entire forecast coming up.